Now, the South American nation of Venezuela is rich in oil and other resources and agricultural bounty, but it's been plunged into economic, social and political trauma and upheaval. Why? Well, according to the ABC, it's hyperinflation.
In Venezuela, 9 out of 10 families don't have enough food to eat. So much so that the average person lost 11 kilograms in 1 year, and about 5 babies are dying each week from malnutrition. But how can there be a food crisis, although there's a shortage of some items due to sanctions, when there is food available? Well, it's to do with hyperinflation.
Well, yes, skyrocketing inflation, of course, has crippled the economy, fuelled the humanitarian crisis and the political unrest. But what caused all this to unfold in Venezuela under former socialist President Hugo Chavez was, of course, a bad dose of garden variety Latin American socialism. Chavez, the former revolutionary, held sway for more than a decade, changed the constitution, nationalised industries, used proceeds of oil exports to spend big on socialist agenda, and he transformed the politics of the nation under the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, a party that he founded. Of course, it all went bust. He died, and now other would-be dictators and socialists and others have been trying and failing to retrieve the situation. But we didn't hear much about that from the ABC this month. A long online piece by Zoe Daniel on June the 12th focused on the plight of the people and said this: charismatic populist President Hugo Chavez was adored by the poor for his community support programs, free healthcare and education, and generally subsidised living. Soon enough after that was published, a global news aggregating website, War News Updates, shared the piece, but its editors added this footnote: the authors of the above report do not mention the word socialism in their report, nor how the policies of nationalisation and government confiscation completely destroyed what was once one of Latin America's top economies. Instead, the focus on why people are starving in Venezuela is on sanctions, corruptions, in short, the usual excuses, while ignoring the real reason why everything has collapsed. That seems to be a fair criticism. Back in Australia, Matthew Lesh, who works for the Institute of Public Affairs and calls himself a free market jihadi, slammed the piece on Twitter. He said the ABC's 2,500-word article didn't mention the word socialism once, but described Chavez as a populist. Lesh said this was disgraceful and biased reporting. He copied Daniel in on his tweet and she responded. The ABC correspondent accused Lesh of being influenced by his own bias and said she had referenced Chavez as a socialist in other stories. Well, yes, we checked and we found this piece. Here, Daniel says socialist leader Hugo Chavez was adored by the poor. He was a socialist leader, that's a fact, but hardly one that was laboured. A day after this all played out on Twitter, the ABC updated Daniel's other online piece, and we noticed just one change to the sentence we showed you earlier. To this day, it now reads, charismatic populist President Hugo Chavez was adored by the poor for his socialist policies, community support programs, free healthcare and education, and generally subsidised living. That's it. Near enough to 2,500 words in the article, not to mention the other articles, and the word socialist is now included. The inclusion of this word after the criticism and in such a perfunctory way only serves to prove the wrong-headedness of this approach. The ABC hasn't replied to our queries about all this, but clearly it's the addition of a key word merely to blunt attacks about them failing to mention socialism. It's a word game now that just points to a broader myopia. There's a deception and self-delusion about the broader picture here, the underlying problems and the fundamentals of this story that might have even embarrassed the late Hugo Chavez. The ABC seems to want to skate over the socialist failure, the socialist genesis of this crisis. And we're simply left to wonder why.